everybody. So as Emma said, I'm Sam Tutil. I'm a Global Media and Ad Tech Director.
And I'm Claire. I'm a Group Business Director, and I run our Incubation Hub, which is our future-facing team that looks after everything which essentially will affect the business 12 to 18 months from now. So we have an AI function that sits within my team. So yeah, that's me.
Just to address one thing in the room before we get started, I've written my notes upside down on the SMG pages. So
it's very on brand
Paul
for
Smith
us.
thinks he's being really clever somewhere later on mentioning it, you're not.
But we're we're all about staying honest and staying foolish. So it's very on brand for SMG. So we're leaning into it, aren't we, Sam?
Yes, we are. So we've got 20 minutes, and we're going to tell you specifically about why we think retailers are actually in competition, not necessarily with each other, but actually with big ad tech, and what they can actually do about it, which is what Claire.
I'm excited.
So clearly, the means of communication within media are evolving rapidly and always have evolved, right? So from the printing press through to the telegraph, the telephone, the mobile, the internet, everything's moving and changing at a rapid rate, and that rate continues to accelerate. But what's truly distinct about our current time is the unprecedented consolidation of media power within the hands of a very small group of companies, right? And they're fundamentally changing and structuring our media ecosystem themselves. Traditional channels, and we'll all know this story very, very well, but traditional channels have obviously started to be eroded in terms of the actual ad revenue that they can get, and they've been losing ground to these digital-first platforms for a very long time. That's predominantly because these digital-first platforms, they're scalable, they've got access to a range of different data sources, and they're also heavily investing in AI automation. So the hegemony that they've got and the control that they've got is just going to get more and more, right? Because they've got a compelling offering and brands actually want to. Thank you very much, Claire. Brands actually want to invest in them, right? If we put that into perspective, in 2023, 67% of all global ad revenue actually went through digital channels, right? And that was only 2 years ago, even though it feels like 100 years ago. This year, in 2025, it's actually forecasted to be 74%. So the change and the drive towards putting investment into digital channels is continuing to grow rapidly. So you get the point, right? Media, content distribution, influence, they're all totally centralized or largely centralized. And if there's anybody that's going to sum up this kind of change in the ecosystem, it's these big three, right? It's Google, it's Meta, it's Amazon. Consider this, so 50% of all ad revenue last year actually went through one of these three platforms. That's huge. That's $400 billion flowing through three individual companies. And they're absolute giants, right? Amazon, their ad business alone made $47 billion in 2023. Meta can reach 3.8 billion people across all their different platforms, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook. So they're absolutely huge. And they're not just giants, they're actually economic superpowers. If you took Amazon's market cap and you ranked it in terms of sovereign GDP in the world, they'd be bigger than 92% of all countries, right? So they're bigger than Australia, they'd be bigger than Thailand. They're an absolute huge giant, right? So they're absolutely massive. So can advertisers, agencies, or users actually affect any of this, right? When you've got somebody so massive, a group of companies so massive, can we actually change anything anymore? I think when you take X as an example, once we all let it sink in that Elon Musk had taken over and that he had been able to fundamentally dismantle a lot of the misinformation and the security processes, brands fled en masse, right? Everybody knows. I'm sure there's lots of media agencies and brands in the room who wouldn't necessarily put their money towards X at the moment just because of the state of play there. However, still a platform that's running, still has a huge user base, and it's fundamentally being propped up by backers, investors in this space. So can we actually influence anything more is the big point. And is competition actually realistic? So hold that thought, right? There's there's the idea that the market is centralized, but then we've got this opposing idea that's coming in, which is there's a new player in town. We've talked about it all day on the retail media stage. Retailers are developing their ad proposition like never before. Hundreds of retailers are joining the marketplace every single year, and they've got a really valuable offering, right? They've got physical assets in store, so they've got ways in which they can reach consumers as they actually physically shop. They've got e-commerce sites, so they've got an on-site opportunity, and they've also got off-site plays as well, right? And what ties all that together is the first-party data that they have. So they're able to understand fundamentally not just what you consume, but how you purchase, how your purchase behavior takes place, and then when you're an advertiser, you're able to connect that ad proposition to the measurement piece, right? So you get a completely closed loop. So it's a really valuable proposition, and we know we've heard a lot about this year retail media is going to bridge, up to 177 billion globally. So it's growing, and not all of that is Amazon. A large share of it is, but there's a lot of new players in that space. Now, is that going to be able to compete with the likes of Google, Meta, Amazon in the new world? The challenge I think we've got is, and it was raised on a number of different panels, is fundamentally fragmentation. So every single time a new retailer joins the market, they're fundamentally a siloed ecosystem. So a brand has to navigate that one retailer, they have to then navigate another retailer, they have to use the platforms that that retailer has, and they might not cross across multiple different retailers, and they've got different standardization, right? They've got different measurement propositions, they've got a range of different ways that you can buy that media. So the challenges are fairly clear: lack of standardization, limited cross-retailer scale. So I just want to go across multiple brands, multiple retailers, how do I actually do that? And then the technical gaps. Everyone's using different technology when I want them to use the same technology so I can scale across. So this remains a challenge, but we think that if retailers can actually come together in some capacity and understand that the market is beyond now the retail media market, it's actually growing into the wider media market. If they collaborate together, we think we can produce much more opportunity for growth for retailers than they currently have, right? We think there's probably potentially a ceiling. Where that ceiling is, we think we can break through that and start to eat into the rest of the media marketplace. So.
Amazing. Well, I suppose the big question then is, collaboration feels like the right thing to happen, but why hasn't it happened? If it's a really obvious thing, why hasn't anybody been doing it? And I suppose the kind of immediate answer that we've already heard across a lot of different topics is it's really hard. It's really hard and it's really risky. It's not an easy thing for us to kind of come. There is no blueprint. There is no way of us kind of saying, how do we collaborate? Oh, well, we just do this and it's an off-the-shelf kind of thing. If you're a retailer, you have to protect your consumer data. It's your number one thing. If you manage it poorly, it means that a brand will be unhappy with you and they will kind of reduce ad spend. If you manage it poorly and a consumer is unhappy with you, they will move and vote with their feet and go elsewhere. It is the single most kind of important thing for a retailer to protect, and that is kind of one of the big first things. So if retailers want to protect all of that data, if you want to do that in the first place, you could build a walled garden, which is something that we've seen a lot of retailers in the US do with massive success. So the likes of Walmart and Target, those guys have built proprietary solutions and looked at kind of third-party technology to kind of bring in these walled gardens. But obviously the thing that we've all heard across the day in so many ways is walled gardens are still a massive issue. People stand on the outside, they are trying to peer through that hedge, and they're trying to figure out whether the grass is the same in walled garden A versus walled garden B, and they can't. It's impossible to do that. And so until agencies and brands can really compare whether the grass is the same in different walled gardens, it's never going to change. The other thing, which is a bit of an elephant in the room as well, is ad tech. In the past, even 6 to 12 months ago, ad tech was fairly siloed. It was more kind of single use, single retailer, and so it was hard for a retailer to decide kind of where to go in that space. So there is no blueprint, but we are seeing change start to happen, which is amazing. Things like clean rooms are now providing this kind of neutral meeting space of data and kind of measurement, which is amazing to see. Ad tech is getting a lot better, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, and attitudes are massively shifting. We're already hearing a lot of conversations about collaboration, and so I think we're standing on a precipice. People want to change, and kind of hopefully this talk will be a little bit of the right direction to kind of making that happen. So one of mine and Sam's jobs is to, I suppose, envision what the future might look like, a bit of a kind of utopian version of what we want collaboration to look like. So where do we go from here? What do we want to see? I suppose these are our kind of 4 pillars that we would love to see kind of going forward. So the first one is standardization and interoperability. So firstly, I would love to thank my colleagues in the tech and retail media space for creating a new word which is really hard to say on stage. So that's kind of like a first plea to the market. Thank you for interoperability. But I suppose the really important thing to say here is that retailers are on really varying journeys in this space, right? You've got one retailer that is really advanced, they've got really advanced measurement methodology, really bespoke kind of reporting. You might have another retailer who operates in a very similar space, who is really early on in that journey and provides very little reporting. If you're a brand, that is really, really hard to navigate. So if we think about this utopian world, imagine a world in which standardization was kind of like a core language. Think about kind of that standardized language between measurement that actually could be, again, interoperable between multiple platforms. Think how that would change the face of our industry. So I suppose my plea to anybody in the room that represents a retailer is really get serious about standardization. That doesn't mean get really complicated. That means just take it seriously and think about your journey and kind of move forward on that, because it's going to become the base of everything that we do in the future. If you're an agency or a brand, really think about kind of pushing your retailer harder and ask hard questions. Retailers want to help. They might not be kind of that far on the journey, but they want to be involved. They want to be part of that conversation. So ask the hard questions, and most of them will come to the table with hopefully some good solutions. The second big point is efficiency. So anybody in this room who has ever booked or managed a retail media campaign, which I have done for the last kind of 12 years, it's really, really complicated. You have multi-platform, multi-inventory, multi-asset, multi-audience, and it is really, really hard. If you're an agency, it's really, really inefficient, and actually it can get really unprofitable, and that's really, really tough for people. So actually, if we were to imagine this utopia, think about a suite of systems or one system in which you could book all of your campaigns in one place. Like, think even if you could book Meta, you could book and optimize it across one platform rather than having to go into 5, say. That means that it could be, half a person's job rather than 3 people's job. Think how that would revolutionize the industry. We could actually give time for kind of real creative thinking rather than just thinking about operational efficiency. So I suppose if you're a retailer, think about this from a point of view of a brand. It's really hard yards out there, so think about it from their point of view. The more you put yourself in their shoes, they will want to work more collaboratively with you. And the same if you're an agency or a brand. Really think about how you can communicate what you want to your retail partners, but my plea is try and be realistic. We're not going to move the industry from A to Z in a week. So if you're an agency and you want to see change in this efficiency area, be realistic, but come to the table with kind of innovative ideas. Our third pillar is all around optimized data, and it's a kind of like a big suite of words, but actually it's a pretty simple concept. We've heard it already. Data is in silos. Every single retailer wants to protect their data. They've got to. It's the right thing to do, especially from a privacy perspective. But ad tech and the kind of innovations in the ad tech space is making this much easier. It means that we can envision this world in which you can have multiple clean rooms across multiple different retailers. You can really safely and securely query audiences across the board and activate. Think how much better we could build kind of campaigns that could perform in a much more kind of bespoke, holistic way, which is better for the consumer at the end of the day. So my kind of plea, I suppose, to retailers is quite simple. Review your ad tech partners, because actually there is so much more innovation in that space, especially in the clean room space, interoperability space. Go back to some of those partners you might have spoken to a year ago, because actually they might have some really interesting things to say. And if you are an agency or a brand, this is a bit of a rogue shout, but think about how you're collecting data and how it can be used going forward. If one of your massive retail partners said one day, we're going to open our gates and we're going to say you can query our data within a clean room subset, use it against your own brand data. If that happened tomorrow, would you be ready? So think about that and think about how you can kind of get ready for the future. And the fourth pillar is a pretty kind of simple one, is that mutually assured growth. At the end of the day, if we remove friction from this process and make retail media easier to book and buy, everybody benefits, and most of all, the consumer does. They get better campaigns. That means that they will have a much better experience. So hopefully it's a kind of mutually beneficial utopia, Sam, which is always great. So that is a very kind of, big, bold vision, I suppose, for what we want the world to look like. But I suppose if we think about it in a real world example, this again is still semi-fictional, but could exist today with the right kind of partnerships together. So think about all of these different kind of data sets coming together. You've got Retailer W, which could bring transactional data, behavioral data, really great stuff that actually allows you to say, this is how somebody has bought your product, at what time, what place, etc., etc. A brand could then bring their CRM and loyalty data, stuff that actually shows how their most important audiences are performing within their own space. You've then got data partners, which is kind of quite new to the industry, I suppose. Think of the likes of Experian and people who can bring really interesting demographic data, intent data, which actually creates these kind of really exciting kind of overlaps in the space. And then we've got tech partners that can allow that matching process to happen, so we can kind of knit all of these audiences together in a really kind of safe way that kind of brings it together in an identity spine. What that gives you is it gives your teams the ability to build really highly refined audiences that could truly perform in a really revolutionary way, right? So you've got all these audiences that sit over here. We can then kind of push them, target them, and activate them. And what becomes really exciting is this kind of idea that's not limited to a single channel, which is where we've been limited before. Think of the example of now we can use CTV, which I know has been a really hot topic today, so we can target people when they're at home, when they're thinking about purchasing something or thinking about kind of that consideration part. We've then got digital out of home. We can target people as they're kind of nearing a store and thinking about that purchasing cycle. And then we've got kind of off-site and retailer-owned channels as well, which is obviously the kind of crux to ensuring somebody makes that kind of final conversion. And I suppose the glue that knits all of this together is the idea of this data clean room, this neutral space in which kind of closed loop measurement can happen. You'll have heard it a lot today. Can't stress how much it will revolutionize the industry if we can really make this happen, because it means that if you're an agency or if you're a brand within this space, you can really start to understand how something is performing live. Think how amazing that is. That means that you could say, right, I'm going to take part of my budget out of CTV, I'm going to put it back into retailer-owned channels, I'm going to switch that, I'm going to test it, and I can do it live. I can do it within my campaign period and actually kind of live optimize what's happened, which is, I don't think we could ever have imagined that to be possible kind of a year ago. So I suppose the thing that I love about this topic is if we'd have presented this slide a year ago, people would have been like, it's not possible. It's not possible at all. This is 100% possible now with the providers and partners that are out there. It just takes people to kind of see that blueprint, be confident in it, and take that kind of first step into the next journey. So if you click on for me, Sam. I suppose what's next? We've talked to you about a potential utopia, potential kind of case study for what this could look like. And then the big thing for me is this could be a reality. So there are plenty of super smart people in this audience. Come find me and Sam over a beer later. Maybe we could hash it out, which would be quite exciting. But in all seriousness, if we don't want to hash it out right now, this could happen and this could be a kind of reality quite quickly for a lot of us in the industry. So retail media has the potential, as Sam said, to really rival those digital giants, but only if we stop thinking in silos and start thinking about us as a kind of connected industry. So looking forward to sitting here in a year's time and seeing it all come to life. That's it from us.